Hi guys, today I'd like to show you how I make my toothbrush holders. I start out by centering 1.5 pounds of clay on my wheel, using my usual cone up and cone down to get it all nice and centered. This will be the base of the toothbrush holder. First, I pull out enough clay that will be the dish of the bottom of the toothbrush holder, and then I open up the center. It's important to flatten out the inside now because you won't be able to get back to it later. Once I'm happy with the inside, I go ahead and pull up the walls of this toothbrush holder. It's important to pull both upwards and inwards on your first pull because you want the base wider than the top, and it's much easier to bow out the shape than it is to bring it back in. I like to use a rib to even out the curve and make sure it joins nicely with that base you pulled out earlier. Right now is when I like to check the height of the piece using my chopstick with pen marks on it. Whenever you cut off the top of a pot like that, you gotta make sure to go back in with a sponge and really smooth and compress the rim. And once all the fiddling is done with the stem of this piece, I'll go in with a wooden knife and pop up that base. I use this technique with a lot of my pots, but I really like how it works. Then you just refine how that bottom edge looks, and it's done. Now for the top of the toothbrush holder, I use 1/2 pound of clay, but I do cut a lot of it off. It's just a small bowl, so you just open it up and smooth it out. I actually throw the bowl a bit larger than I need it to be, and then I use a cut-up gift card as a guide to the shape of the bowl. It's also a quick way for me to get a consistent size on these. So I cut off the extra and then just redefine the rim. A little extra fiddling and then it's ready to go and dry. After they're cut off their bats and dried enough, I like to tap center my pots, but you got to be careful with these taller ones because they're very easy to knock over and send them flying. And I'll just trim them the way I trim any pot. Stick them down with some. A sure form is key. It creates a very small amount of drag, which is very good because, like I said, these are very easy to knock over. Then I'll use a flat trimming tool just to clean up the lines left behind by the sure form. I like to use the tiny little loop tool to define the foot of my pots. And then, like everything I do, lots of little fiddling and really figuring out the shape that I want. When you see a large surface that you need to trim, it's really natural to try and get the biggest loop tool to trim it with, but don't do that. It will create lots of drag and you'll probably get an uneven trim. It's much better to go in with a smaller loop tool and just take small amounts of clay at a time, and then clean it up after with your larger flat edge. Trimming up the top of the toothbrush holder is pretty simple. You don't even have to put a foot on it. I just use my sure form to get off the large amount of clay and then go back in with a loop tool to get the rest. When trimming something like this, it's important to keep in mind the shape of the inside of the piece and try and match that with the bottom. One of the reasons I like to work in batches is I can go ahead and put all the bases of the toothbrush holders out. They're all a slightly different size, and this way I can get a more even and consistent height across the board. Now that everyone's paired up with their dance partners, so the first step is to center the base of the toothbrush holder on the wheel. Once it's stuck down, I poke a little hole in the top part and grab a sponge. This sponge will make sense in a minute, but it stops extra clay from falling into the inside of the toothbrush holder. Then I'll go ahead and score the top of the bottom of the toothbrush holder and the bottom of the top of the toothbrush holder. I'll apply slip liberally to the top of the base of the toothbrush holder. This will be the glue that will hold the top and bottom together. Without the hole in the top of the toothbrush holder, you'd trap a lot of air in there when putting it down, and it's really hard to get them even. But once I'm happy with how they're lined up, I'll go ahead, push it down, and clean up the extra slip on the outside. Then with some extra soft clay, I'll make a coil and wrap it around the outside of the join. To open up the top of my toothbrush holder, I start with a needle tool. After cutting a hole through the top, I go in with my wooden knife and slowly cut off more. The trick here is to use the knife both as a trimming tool and as a sculpting tool. By doing this, I'm compressing the bottom of the top of the toothbrush holder into the walls of the base of the toothbrush holder. And once I'm happy with how smooth they are, I'll go back in and pull that sponge out. Some clay bits will still fall inside, but it was a life changer when I started putting the sponge in. Compared to the cleanup on the inside of the piece, the outside is very easy. I just cut off the extra soft clay that I put on the outside, make sure the joint is smooth, and it's pretty much good to go. Just a little bit of extra cleanup and it's ready to go and be carved. These holes are going to hold toothbrushes. I like to put 5 holes in each toothbrush holder. I use my little paper star to mark out the 5 points and then this cookie cutter to punch out the holes. This cookie cutter used to be round until I stepped on it and now it's an oval. But luckily that's what I need it for. After punching all the holes, I just go back in with a sponge to clean up the cuts. Now it's time for the best part ever, decorating. I always decorate the top of the toothbrush holder first. That's because the top is the part that dries the fastest, and it's not so much fun to slip trail on a dry surface. The slip will actually pop right off. Now, before anyone asks, I'm using my air pen to do the slip trailing. I have a link to their website in my Instagram highlights, so you can go and check it out. I'm going to cut this part of the video short because all you see is my head. After decorating the top of the toothbrush holder, I set it aside and let the slip dry fully. Then I can come back in and decorate the sides without messing up the top. So in these longer videos, I'm not sure if I should leave in all the slip trailing or just leave part of it in. It is part of the whole process, but I'm not sure if it's too much downtime in the middle of the video. Please let me know. After slip trailing, these guys will get set aside to dry, and then once they're dry, I put them in the kiln and bisque fire them. The bisque fire will leave the pots stronger than they are when they're bone dry, and they won't dissolve in water, but they're still porous enough to allow me to apply glaze. The first step of glazing is to apply wax. I just go in with a little sponge and apply it to the base of the pot. This will help the extra glaze run off the bottom of the pot and really cuts down on cleaning time. So the first step is just dunking it in the primary glaze. Luckily, I have enough of this glaze to dunk the whole thing using the tongs. You just have to be very careful with the tongs. Don't put them on the upper rim of the toothbrush holder because it might break. When I clean off the bottoms of my pots, I'll start with a big sponge. This covers a lot of area and cuts down on other cleaning. I'll then go back in with a smaller sponge and do some more detailed cleanup. And depending on my waxing skills, sometimes I'll go in with a wooden kebab skewer and clean up the excess glaze. We're getting close to the finish line. So I like to go in with a little squeeze bottle and apply a secondary glaze to the slip trailing on my pots. Unlike when applying slip trailing, sometimes I'll do the top first and sometimes I'll do the base first. There's some things you should remember if you're going to apply glaze with a little squeeze bottle. One is that different glazes flow and dry differently. This brown glaze takes longer to dry than my green glaze, so I have to be careful when I rotate my pot to move on to the next pattern. And some glazes flow better than others. So while this glaze has a wide, long plastic nib on the end of the bottle, I have others that use short and smaller nibs so they don't let out too much glaze at once. And then once everything is glazed, I take it back home to the kiln and load it up. I just recently posted a kiln loading video, and so if you want to, you should check that out. And here's how they came out. I'm super happy with them. Each of these can hold up to 5 toothbrushes and your standard sized toothpaste in the middle. If any of you all try this out, please send me a message, send me a picture. I'd love to see how they came out. And thanks so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed.